Panelists for engaging us, and thank you for observing the time. Can we give them another round of applause for staying within the time limits? Certainly, some food for thought. Just to recap, we started with Dr. Beverly Ann Carter, and one of the things that stood out for me is that one of the statements made in that presentation was that where, as obtains the languages, that we lack strategic focus, and I think the lack of strategic focus in terms of the diversification process is made manifest in that lack of a strategic focus in the area of the delivery of languages, and that we need to continue to build capacity. So I think this is a fitting start in terms of the academic presentations for the remainder of this conference in terms of setting the tone, in that we have highlighted some of the deficiencies that needs to be addressed before we can begin the overarching discussion of diversification, followed by Dr. Henry, who pointed out that there are deficiencies also in our institutions, which inhibits us by way of innovation, and we need to continue to build capacity and probably redesign a curriculum that will foster more innovation within the system. And last, I'm sure a lot of eyebrows were raised, and I heard some oohs and ahs about having to pay for your own tuition, not at the point of consumption, but at the completion of your tertiary level education. Now, I think, again, that sets the tone, and I must say, I thank you all, and I will give you all a special round of applause from me to you, because I know I always dread having to teach a class after lunch, because everybody's eyes get heavy because the digestion process has begun. So I thank you all for staying awake. I know I cheated. I had 2 slices of cake just to make sure I didn't fall asleep. So I thank you all for that. Now we will open up for discussion, and we'll take a round of questions, a couple rounds of questions from members of the audience, and we will have the panelists. You can either direct the question to the panelists that you think, or you can leave it to either one of the panelists to decide how they would address the question raised. And if you can just give us your name when you get up to ask the question or pose the question, we would appreciate that as well. So again, open for discussion now for the first round of questions. You can come to the mic. There are some mics at the, I think there are 2 mics available, so you can come to the mic. And
okay, normally I ask 3 questions, but today I'm going to ask 2. Well, the first one is that looking at curriculum and curriculum change with regard to education and human resource development, and in terms of looking at diversification of our economy, I believe that some of the discussions that we have had during this session lead to that sort of thing. But I think that we have to seriously look at curriculum change with regard to diversification from, I would say, kindergarten until, well, the 50s and I'm 71. I finished my master's the other day and I got GATE, so I can't get any GATE anymore. So I cannot continue to study. But I think that we need to have that sort of a curriculum awareness. The second thing is that the question of the age group, and this is something that I might not have brought up today, but since it was mentioned in Dr. Hussein's discussion, I wanted to take a look at it because I brought it up in Port of Spain recently. In this country, you had 3,000 or plus young people dying from being murdered. Each of them had what? 2 wives. That's what? 3 to the 6,000. Each of them have 2 children. That's 12,000 people. Okay, we are talking about. The other aspect of it is we also have something like 20,000 people who are HIV infected in this country. Okay? So when we look at education and human resource development and diversification, we have some serious issues that we are going to have to face, or we are already facing, because of the falling birth rate in Trinidad and Tobago, the death rate in Trinidad and Tobago. And the last time I brought up something in Port of Spain, our footprint with regard to the global warming and that sort of thing. How is that affecting our country? Because while we talk about there's a falling level of birth rate, the question is that sulfur being produced in Point Lisas and in Trinidad and Tobago affecting the ability in Trinidad and Tobago to reproduce. And I believe we need to look at these dimensions in accordance with what Dr. Hussein was saying, particularly with regard to age group, reproduction, and why it is that there's a falling birth rate in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Celia Punking. I'm actually a postgraduate student at Salises. I have two questions, one for Henry and the other one for Dr. Hussein. Henry, I wondered whether there was, you made a statement in relation to culture, and I wondered what data you had to support that within the, well, both projects. And the second one was for Dr. Hussein. You made a statement in relation to diverting funds to primary education. And it was this question in relation to the previous speaker, who we have a decreasing birth rate, and so the primary school population is decreasing. So what was it that you were suggesting in relation to primary primary level schooling? Because I wasn't too clear on that. Beverly, I enjoyed your presentation. I don't have a question.
Yeah, we can take one more question.
Good afternoon. Dr. Hussein, my question is for you. Given the last statement that you made about students and their contribution towards their own education, my question relates to the practicality of your suggestion, especially given the current job market, and in terms of whether you see that solution that you proposed as being an immediate or a long-term solution in terms of implementation. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you for their questions. I'll now turn it over to the panelists to respond appropriately, or respond to the comments or questions.
All right. Thank you for the questions and comments. In terms of the two of the questions were fairly similar in terms of population dynamics. The reality is we have a falling, a declining youthful population. And therefore, as you saw with the real numbers, these are real numbers for the university, 13,062 versus 10,761. And that is even before we implement GATE. So when you increase the price of tertiary level education by between 25% to 50%, you will have a decrease in the quantity demanded. So that we cannot afford to leave the university. Let us assume that in 2011, 2012, we are operating at optimal capacity. We cannot afford that extent of decline in the number of students that we cater to. That would increase per unit cost in many different ways. And therefore, the intervention that is perhaps needed at this point in time is to continue to allow GATE to be, continue to allow tertiary level education to be free at the point of utilization, so that no poor student is denied. In fact, we need to find strategies even in the context of free at the point of utilization to get more of you all to come here. So certainly I think the current suggestion by the Ministry of Education will fail. I do not think it has merit in the context of the demography of the economy in the medium-term period. And in terms of the last comment, if one were to look at CSSP data, which we see is under scrutiny as we speak, and people are losing their jobs, even so, if we look at CSSP data, we would see that for tertiary level education students, the unemployment rate is lowest. Also, we would have to clean up, as my views are a little different to Henry's own, the OJT program as we go along, because by having universal tertiary level education, what we had to do to cater for some of the graduating history students and perhaps literature and in fields like that, not that those are bad areas, is we have to create a OJT program to kind of teach them real-world skills in terms of going and work for people with dynamic research like Henry. So the OJT program may have to go as well in part in some ways.
So I'll take that last comment as a question from the panel. So I just want to say, my point was not that OJT must go. It must be examined. To test the hypothesis at least, to see whether this dynamic is somehow associated with that. I should add that, as I said, I've had 3 OJT. My personal experience has been excellent. One of them actually had a master's degree in entrepreneurship. And she was working with me as a research assistant. And she had ideas for business. I mean, now she's in the process of starting a business and so on. I just wondered. But the other question was from Dr. Poon King, which is a great question, which is the issue of what data do we have on national culture. And we do actually have some data. I referred in the findings from GEM that look at that process of from having an idea for a new product through gestation into having a marketable entity that around which we can build a business. When I gave a reference to the work of Hofstede and his colleagues, and they have actually they have this 5-dimensional model on which they can evaluate a community, and they give great insight into things like our capacity to innovate. So, indeed, the most important element or dimension from that model of anthropology is called uncertainty avoidance. And cultures that are very low, on uncertainty avoidance. This means that the people are quite comfortable with ambiguity. We can operate without many rules and many clear guidelines as to what we're supposed to do. And the idea is this is great for thinking out of the box. And if you look at all people, we're great at that. You could build a road anywhere, and within a week, the maxi taxi will figure out a way to get around whatever it is we've put there to channel the traffic in it. But there are so many things about our people that are creative and that are brilliant. But when it comes to harnessing that or taking this ability and converting that to somehow producing goods that we can export, one challenge that we have stems from that same creativity. It is that our low levels of uncertainty avoidance carry with it that discipline or a deficiency in the discipline that would be required to make a commercially viable product. And this is in a context where we already have the challenge of a resource-based economy with all of the rent-seeking, with all the other things that go with it. We have particular challenges in making that accomplishment. So, Dr. Poon King, there are data on this, and you can. I actually have a paper on this as well, but the original work is by Hofstede and his colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, I know we probably have a lot more questions, but in the interest of time, I would allow each panelist 1 minute or less to make a closing statement, and I'm sure they'll be around at the end of today's proceedings, and you can ask them questions.
All right. Closing statement that I didn't get to in my slides, talking about the need really for the academy and industry to work together. Because in the case of our project, this is something, there's research on this. There is research on competitiveness. There are language economists. So the idea that your resource, your pool of ideas should only come from one field. Certainly the economists have something to say that we have to listen to. I don't think I could fly my faculty flag here without saying, responding to the history and literature people don't have job skills. I take great offense to that state, but not true at all, right? History and literature people are taught how to think and how to think in structured ways and how to think critically. And top skill you need is critical thinking. Our disciplines do that, our language disciplines. But repeating what has been said, we have to talk to each other. We have to bring the academy and the industry closer together and fertilize each other's fields. That would be my closing statement.
I think that's pretty good, actually. My closing statement is this. I've spoken today about two great data sets that the university has invested a lot of money to create. I see in the newspaper every week, I go to public forums, I hear people talking. There is a lot of data that's not used. And I encourage everybody, all students, academics, everybody, look at the GEM report, look at the GCR. These things come out every year. They have whether you agree with the conclusions or not, they have good data that we could be using to inform policy, to inform our deliberations, our discussions, and so on.
Thanks. Wasn't intending to speak on that, but I noticed I said that not that these skills aren't useful, but I didn't realize Mike. I missed Mike in the audience, and I would have stayed quiet. My closing comment would be to Mr. Franklin. Although I would have another time and place to say this, most of the people wouldn't be here. Whilst you have retired and you are on your way out, therefore, we certainly wish you would continue to be part of the department. For those of you all who miss him, you have missed. I have been here since 1989. Since 1992, I have been teaching. And certainly, I have not had a better head of department. Very organized, very clinical, very systematic, very staff-oriented. And I wish you the best as you leave, but we also hope that you would continue to engage us in the ways that you can. Thank you.
Thank you.